So yeah, as I said, thanks everyone for joining. I'm really excited to listen to what our exciting lineup of speakers have got to say. Today's topic will be how to set up a youth hub. We'll be hearing from Impetus, people from Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Elizabeth from ERSA firstly. I will also say that representatives from DWP are here, but they won't be doing a segment, but they will be available to ask questions to towards the end. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think this meeting and this agenda topic is long overdue, but we were trying to get to the point where we felt we'd come out of anything that COVID was going to throw under the wheels of people setting up the youth hub and derail the bus. So there's somebody else who keeps speaking. Is there somebody who's not on mute? It's throwing me a little bit. Anyway, okay. So ERSA has funding from the Youth Futures Foundation to look at how we engage employment support providers to enhance provision around youth employment and to address youth unemployment, particularly NEETs and people who don't ordinarily engage with provision. We are also working with our members, of which we now have over 300, to actually look at how ERSA members through their delivery, whether it's a small local provision through to a large national DWP provision, can best tailor and bring those provisions to young people. So we are obviously really keen on the whole youth hubs idea. I think in a wider context, we're very interested in that whole idea of co-location. We particularly know of some examples, and I always use the Zest Centre in Sheffield, where they're delivering employment support in a building that houses a library, a community cafe, a gym and a swimming pool. You can't get much more co-location than that. So I think there's things to be learned when we bring provision together, when we bring it together with DWP, when we look at whether we bring in health or housing or money advice, and definitely skills provisions, and what happens when we're all in the same place. The original idea of youth hubs is that they would sit outside of job centres, and we know that that hasn't always been easy to instigate so far, and some of the initial youth hubs were in the pop-up job centres that were a COVID response, but I think we're getting to a point now where we can look at youth hubs that are truly in the community. So this session is to help people consider setting up a youth hub, providing the resources and directing them to things like the Impetus blueprint for setting up a youth hub, to draw on the experience of some people who have recently set up youth hubs, to hear from Greater Manchester Combined Authority, as always leading the way, who have a strategy of all young people having access to a youth hub. Or I think that's the strategy, Sharon. Correct me later if I'm wrong. And we'd like to see that everywhere, whatever the postcode, whatever the footprint. So we're really moving forward with this. We want to make it work. Then we want to evaluate how co-location works for employment support providers. We want to record lessons learned. And whilst this is a really big focus of our youth employment agenda, there will be lessons learned here that we can apply to people with care and responsibilities over 50s and those that are currently not engaged in the labour market and with job centres that employment support organisations can reach. So that's me just setting the scene, handing back over to Henry, and really looking forward to hearing the speakers.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you set up the next speakers much better than I would have done. But yeah, so we'll go straight to Impetus to hear about the blueprint.
Okay, brilliant. I will just start sharing. Got some slides. Brilliant. Can everyone see those okay? Okay, fantastic.
Yes, we can, yeah.
So I'm Phoebe Arslanagic-Wakefield. I'm Senior Policy Advisor at Impetus. One of my 2 policy focuses is youth employment policy. I'm also joined today by my colleague Ben Gadsby, whose work many of you will know. He's Impetus's head of policy and research. So I'm going to be talking to you, as Elizabeth said, about the Library of Birmingham Youth Hub Blueprint, which Impetus was involved in earlier this year. But first, some background. Who are Impetus? So Impetus is a charity which exists to help disadvantaged young people to succeed in education and employment. We work to achieve this mission in 2 ways. First, through our policy team, commissioning, carrying out research to better understand the nature of the challenge and solutions in terms of closing the attainment gap between disadvantaged young people and their better off peers. And also actually by working with other charities. We have a really unique approach that provides our partner charities with unrestricted core funding and expertise to make them stronger, better and bigger, and that's through our investment team. So who are Resurgo? So Resurgo are an organisation I'll be talking a little bit about in this presentation, and they are one of Impetus's charity partners, working on helping unemployed young people into work. Resurgo's SPEAR programme supports 16 to 24-year-olds into work or training through intensive coaching, career supports. They had a lot of expertise that was really relevant to this project, and they co-facilitated much of the work I'll be talking about today. And then what is the Birmingham Library Youth Hub Blueprint? So Impetus was invited to be part of developing this youth hub as a demonstrator site to act as an example to the wider network of what good practice could look like. So the document that this presentation draws on, the blueprint, captures the decisions made by the creators of the youth hub in sessions that were facilitated by Impetus and by Resurgo, the key lessons that emerged from that co-creation process. It's that process, those decisions and lessons that I'll be talking about today. It's one way of setting up a youth hub. So the co-creation process had 3 goals. 1, to improve the quality of young people's outcomes at the Library of Birmingham Youth Hub. 2, to improve the quality of outcomes across the Youth Hub network. And 3, to trial a co-creation approach that DWP could potentially deploy across the entire.
We can't hear you, Phoebe. No. Yeah, sorry, we still can't hear you. You're not on mute by the looks of it, so I'm not sure what's no. No, still can't hear you, sorry. No. If you wanted to try leaving and joining again. Right. Or if Ben, you want to fill the silence with some facts about Impetus.
Yeah, sorry, I was actually just getting the presentation up in case this doesn't get resolved so that we can switch over. But I know, Phoebe, I think it has Bluetooth stuff that does sometimes do this, so I'm hoping it might sort itself out. Facts about Impetus is a tricky one. Our office is at Charing Cross. You're all welcome to visit if you're ever in the Charing Cross area. We have meeting rooms that we can lend you if you're wanting to meet somebody locally. Phoebe says in the chat she's just going to attempt to rejoin the call, which is probably sensible. We'll know when she's left because the screen sharing will probably disappear. Are there any facts about Impetus that you particularly want to know, Henry?
God, should have come prepared.
What about why you started doing the work around youth hubs? A bit of background. I know Phoebe was sort of touching on that.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. So some of you will know Sam Windet, who used to be our Director of Policy and before that was at ERSA, was in conversation with sort of DWP and West Midlands Combined Authority, just kind of in general in the kind of early COVID era, And it became clear this was something DWP wanted to do. It was clear something that the West Midlands Combined Authority in Birmingham was going to be a demonstrator site on. And it was one of those very weird things that just sort of happened kind of quite naturally, where, I mean, we all remember what the pandemic was like, right, in terms of it was just kind of chaos, right? We were all attempting to do our jobs and work from home and only go shopping once a week and all that kind of stuff. So when people like DWP were thinking about, hey, we want to set up a new kind of youth offer, thinking about the kind of the likely damage to the economy, it was just a kind of natural conversation to think about, you know, like, how can we help, what's useful, and this kind of process sort of emerged from all of those conversations as a kind of it's similar to some work that we do with the kind of the charities that we fund, in terms of thinking about you know, as Phoebe will hopefully be able to talk about shortly, thinking about, like, okay, what is it you're actually trying to achieve in terms of a mission? You know, who is it you want to support in terms of your target population? What is it you want to achieve with them? So it just ended up being a kind of a natural thing where these questions were sort of live questions for the Birmingham Youth Hub. We had a lot of experience at sort of facilitating those conversations and helping people kind of work through the implications of those decisions. So it all just happened really naturally. And then Sam left to go to the Learning and Work Institute, and I got past the project mid-project to kind of to bring it to fruition, which was kind of interesting and exciting in equal measure. On the basis that Phoebe hasn't reappeared, is it perhaps sensible if I dive in where she left off?
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
That's good, because we were very much running out of impetus-y facts. Can people see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, super, fantastic.
Thanks, Dan.
Obviously, I now can't see the chat or anything, so if Phoebe reappears, please do somebody interrupt me. Okay, so theory of change process. So we do this theory of change process a lot with our charities, as I say, and it's basically about getting all the people that matter in a room to work out what you're doing and why. So in the case of Library of Birmingham Youth Hubs, we co-facilitated it with our partners, Resurgo, which is a charity we've been funding for a number of years. And the kind of the key founding partners for the Library of Birmingham Youth Hubs were in the room. So we had representatives from sort of DWP, West Midlands Combined Authority, the Council and the Prince's Trust. We spoke to some young people as part of the process. And it's worth saying we had a good mix of kind of sort of leadership and more junior people involved in having these conversations. So we had, you know, DWP work coaches were in the room for part of it. We had DWP policy people in the room for it. But also, you know, we had sort of kind of buy-in, and we had a drop-in from JP Marks back when he was kind of director at DWP as well. So kind of good engagement across a range of levels. And the point of this is to kind of co-design what this youth hub looks like, so that everybody's on the same page about that. All of these pieces are kind of sort of intersect with each other, I guess. So it's a very iterative process over 4 days to kind of work through all of the implications of it. And, you know, sometimes there are two things that you think you're going to come with to as conclusions, and actually you realize they don't quite work together. And from an Impetus perspective, really all about kind of just challenging people to work through this stuff. I think it's sometimes quite hard in the sector. Like, everybody wants to do good stuff, and actually nobody wants to necessarily have the really awkward conversation about things like, you know, are there some young people who we are just not set up to help? And are there some young people that will be okay without our help? And how do we feel about that? So really kind of asking the challenging questions while being empathetic about it. So these are the 5 areas of theory change that we worked with the team to kind of resolve and to kind of come up with something that worked for them. Like I say, they're all interconnected. So you start at the top and work through, but actually, you know, you can get to some of that later stuff and realize that some of the earlier decisions you've made have implications that maybe they're not feasible, whether that's financially, whether that's just kind of as a practicality or whatever. So it's more iterative than linear. But worth running through, I think, what the team there came up with. And I think what I would say is there's kind of 2 ways of thinking about this. You can either look at this as this is what a youth hub should look like, And if you want to take it as a kind of off-the-shelf, here's what a youth hub should do, you can. At the other extreme, you can think about it as a list of answers to questions, where each question you'd want to answer for your own youth hub. I think in practice, you probably want to be somewhere between the two. You probably don't want to start completely from scratch, but at the same time, you want to have a youth hub in a particular area that reflects the people that are involved in that youth hubs and the needs of the local people. All of which is to say that like a lot of thought goes into coming up with what are relatively kind of pithy and short-ish conclusions for each of these things. So mission. So for the Library Birmingham Youth Hub, they came up with the mission that's on the page there. This is one of those things where we have a saying at Impetus, like you can tell a good mission when you can tell that like every single word has been kind of really sweated over. Some of the keywords are kind of highlighted there, just worth talking about quickly. So like youth hubs as an active partnership. There may well be lots of people delivering kind of services for young people who are kind of connected to the youth hub in some way as delivery partners, but actually at the core, a group of sort of active participants in really driving the youth hub forward. Finding and engaging young people, so not just kind of dealing with referrals, like that find piece. The Birmingham Youth Hub thought was really important to go out their way to bring people in, and that role as a connector, I think, is probably in some ways central to kind of what youth hubs are trying to do. It's not just about bringing them in to receive your provision because you're the people running the youth hub. It's about finding the right kind of opportunities to them and connecting them to them. And then in terms of as an outcome, wanting to get them into kind of good, sustained employment or education. And again, that's another phrase where there's been lots of sort of sweating over those kind of key terms. You know, I think most people on this call probably, would be on board with the idea that kind of just getting people into employment isn't necessarily enough if it's not, if it's not sustained, and actually if it doesn't meet sort of some kind of minimum standards about kind of what good employment would look like. So that's the kind of the mission piece. Flowing from that, who are you trying to help? So we've got, in this mission, unemployed young people. What kinds of young people are we particularly looking for? Birmingham may feel like a slightly obvious one, but there was a really interesting question about Birmingham is a big city. Are you being more targeted than that? Birmingham is the kind of the centre, like a regional centre, and lots of young people come into Birmingham from the wider West Midlands area. Like, do you want to help them? It's worth saying with target population, the big thing is this isn't about turning away people that don't meet your target population necessarily, but it's about being clear about who you actively are going out of your way to try and help. So if you're from Solihull and you walk into the Library Birmingham youth hubs, the blueprint says that you're not they're not going out their way to find young people from Solihull, but they're not turning people away. Unemployed rather than underemployed, always a tricky one. Skills barriers. I appreciate there are always some people in the ERSA network that specialise in kind of other barriers, whether those are kind of health barriers to work or whatever. But there was a real sense that kind of this youth hub would be focused on skills, whether that's kind of technical skills, softer skills, job search skills, whatever that may look like. And 16 to 24. Again, I'm sure there will be providers on the call that do a kind of a whole range of services, and I'm sure there may even be some that do some work in schools and work with slightly younger groups. But again, for Birmingham, 16 to 24 was where they ended up. What I think is interesting is different providers obviously have different kind of funding streams and different kind of restrictions on that funding. So this isn't to say that necessarily everybody that is involved in there's necessarily a perfect overlap between everything that every partner in a youth hub does with this target population. This is about who the youth hub in its totality is trying to serve. The Birmingham Youth Hub isn't like a legal entity that you can donate money to or anything like that. But if you think about it as wanting to create an organisation from the kind of the parts from the partnership, that's kind of where that comes from. I talked a little bit about the outcomes because that's the bit I'm always most interested in on the mission. Each of those words, as I say, has been kind of sweated over. And again, I know there are some providers who, different people take different views as to about kind of education as a good outcome or as a target outcome, and that was something that the library alighted on. The big thing is the kind of the program design piece. So all of this really is to inform your program design. Like, unless you're clear who you want to help, what you want to help them to do, it's hard to be clear about like what your program looks like. And so this is kind of the bulk of it, and at the core of the Youth Hub, I would suggest, is this kind of like, this is what the Youth Hub is actually doing. So we've got these kind of 5 stages. So first of all, you need to kind of find and engage your young people. There's an element of kind of outreach in this. There's an element of referrals in this. There's an element of like drop-in this. Hopefully you're in a location where people will drop in. There's all sorts you can do about that. The second piece is kind of this needs assessment piece. And I think one of the most interesting things for me from the conversations we had in Birmingham was this sense that everybody does their own needs assessment. And actually that's quite tricky for young people. So the hope and the ambition was, can you have a kind of common needs assessment for the Youth Hub that effectively works for everybody, to kind of cut down on the number of different needs assessments that young people need to do. Actually, worth flagging that that's really hard and really ambitious, right? Like, I'm sure there are people on the call who are immediately thinking, oh dear God, what about GDPR? And I'm not convinced anybody has necessarily nailed that piece. But like, in an ideal world, flowing from what we're trying to achieve and from what we heard from young people, you'd have this this kind of common needs assessment, which would enable you then to kind of design a kind of personalized pathway for young people, and then connect them to the kind of provision that's going to meet that. So, you know, if you are lacking in confidence, you'd want to kind of think of a pathway and some provision that would be good for boosting young people's confidence. If it's kind of CV and interview skills, that's a, you know, a different kind of set of provision and pathway. If it's technical skills, it's a different kind of provision and pathway again, and so on and so forth. The young people then have to go to that provision, whether that's delivered by a member of the kind of Youth Hub partnership in the Youth Hub, whether that is delivered by a different kind of partner elsewhere, whatever that looks like it's going to vary a lot on depending on the provision and the context. And then crucially, at the end, you've got that should be tracking rather than tackling, tracking the outcomes for young people. So again, this comes all the way back to the kind of the outcomes point, like, where are you trying to get young people to? Like, you need to, if this is what you want to achieve with them, you need to have some piece as part of your program to know whether you've achieved that or not. And in particular, for something like a Youth Hub, if you're referring young people to lots of different kinds of provision, over time, you want to develop a kind of a sense of whether different kinds of provision are working to do that. Like, there's probably more than one provider in a local area that will help young people with interview and CV skills. Over time, what you'd want to do is you want to get a sense of, like, is one provider, does it lead to better outcomes than the other? Is there a difference by, you know, I don't know, gender or ethnicity or something? Is, you know, is one provider actually much better at dealing with girls and another provider's actually just got a really strong track record of dealing with people from the kind of the Black ethnic group, for example? Like, you want to kind of track on a spreadsheet effectively for the Youth Hub, like what's working and what isn't. And this kind of starts to try and kind of put some of that kind of the meat on the bones that I've just sort of talked about in terms of how you actually deliver that in practice. The thing I've forgotten, because I wasn't expecting to be delivering this provision, is like, one of the most interesting things for me was the talk about a kind of a hosting mindset and a welcoming culture right at the beginning of this journey. I think there was a real sense that, like, this is one of the things that the Youth Hub has the opportunity to potentially do really differently. Like, a lot of the kind of the provision bit in the middle is, you know, provision that already exists. We're not talking about inventing new provision here. Like, tracking what happens on a spreadsheet is not kind of rocket science and doesn't necessarily directly affect the young people's experience. But that upfront piece about you know, making sure it's a welcoming environment that young people want to come to is kind of central to the kind of what the Youth Hub does. And there's some interesting stuff in the blueprint about, like, what that can look like in practice in terms of, you know, work coaches wearing t-shirts, you know, people, you know, knowing your name when you walk in. Do you want to do donuts on a Friday? That kind of thing. And then at the end of it all, you want to do this, you want to track, you know, what's working and what isn't. And the other thing that really came out of this this process was that you need somebody to do that. you need somebody whose job it is to like design the spreadsheet, make sure the spreadsheet is being filled in properly, analyze that data. Whether that is like, again, if the Youth Hub was an organization, the Youth Hub would go out and recruit like a data and performance manager. Whether that is somebody that is employed by one of the kind of the partners, whether that is some like whether this ends up being part of somebody's job at one of the partners. Like, there's lots of different models, but to really maximize on doing this stuff well, you do need some kind of some resource, and the amount of resource obviously will depend on the size of the Youth Hub. Like the Library Birmingham Youth Hub as a flagship, I think we effectively came to the conclusion to start with, you want a whole person on that. Obviously, if you're thinking of a smaller Youth Hub with a kind of smaller demand, you probably don't need as much kind of resource on that. These are the main things that came out of the kind of conversation as, in our view, kind of pivotal to the Youth Hub process being successful. The two that I would pick up on, so I've talked a bit about culture and environment. The other one that's like worth just really nailing is kind of leadership. Like, I think there's a sense, or certainly I had a sense at the time, that like we're talking about an active partnership, but there is a risk that nobody kind of leads that and owns that. You need to have some kind of process for both making the strategic decisions, which is probably something akin to like a board or an SMT where all the partners are involved, but you also need somebody like day to day managing the people, like from different kind of organizations, right? If you want the Youth Hub to operate like a coherent entity, like somebody's got to be running it as a coherent entity, and that leadership piece I thought was interesting. I think that's inevitably a challenge when you come to partnerships, right? And how you design your partnerships. So much so that the leadership came out as one of the kind of the key challenges. Space, I think, less of an issue. People are less kind of COVID concerned now, and certainly in the Birmingham case, they've got a really great space in the library. Like, you walk into the library and there are kind of stickers on the floor directing you in the right direction and stuff. They've got a really good space there. The kind of leadership point I've talked about. The money is the other interesting one, because like, again, if you were an individual, like if you were a Youth Hub as an entity, you'd go out and you'd fundraise, or you'd have contract income, or whatever it was that would enable you to kind of pay for some of that kind of central services stuff, like the leadership, like the data and performance management person. But actually, in a more distributed kind of Youth Hub, you perhaps, like, different people have control of different pots of money, and different people have kind of different restrictions on how they can and can't and will and won't spend their money, which I just think is an inherent challenge in the model, effectively, but worth naming. I'm not 100% sure what the conclusion is of that. I appreciate I've just thrown loads of information out there, and I imagine there are kind of loads of questions. I guess if I was concluding, I would say the leadership and the money are probably the two things to kind of really nail. I feel like you can make whatever decisions you want about what your mission is, who it is you're trying to serve, what outcomes you want to get them to. I feel like none of it will actually happen if you haven't got somebody leading to make sure it happens on the ground, and some kind of process to make sure there's kind of money to actually make it happen. So I guess that would be my conclusion. Apologies that was slightly disjointed, but that's that. I don't know if we're taking questions now or up to you, Henry.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Ben. I know I didn't want to interrupt you in full flow, but I know Phoebe is back, so I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Phoebe, to conclude, or.
No, I don't think so. Only really to express my thanks to Ben for taking over so smoothly.
You missed the bit where it wasn't smooth.
I think it was vastly less smooth on my end. So in comparison.
I'm gonna come back to questions after this, because I know Sharon from Greater Manchester Combined Authority is under slight time constraints. So yeah, we'll come back for questions if that's okay. But yeah, thank you again, and we'll go to Sharon and Suzanne next.
Brilliant. Thanks, Henry, and thanks, Ben and Phoebe. That was really interesting, and I think our presentation will feed seamlessly into the approach and how we're trying to embed some of that learning in that approach. So so I'm Sharon Weetman from the GM Combined Authority. I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of what we are trying to do in Greater Manchester and how. And then I'm going to hand over to Suzanne Gilmore from Wigan Council, who's going to do probably the more interesting bit, which is a brand new youth hub, how it's happening in practice and how we're actually making that happen. So I shall just share. I've got, as ever, I've got loads of slides, but I'm going to try and whip through them really quickly. We will share them afterwards. There we go. I thought I'd lost my slides for a second then. Okay, so just as a really quick background, we do have a youth hub network established across Greater Manchester. So we have 10 local authorities within the GM footprint, and as part of the DWP Youth Offer programme, colleagues from Jobcentre Plus have been working with a number of partners for the last 18 months, 2 years. When we looked at kind of what did that look like earlier this year, we found we've got some really great offers, but they're not in every local authority area. And where they are available, they're not consistent in terms of which partners are involved, what can you access when you're visiting. There's quite a low level of awareness about what a hub is and where they are across young people and professionals. Young people hadn't been involved in the design, and that's a really important cultural aspect for us in Greater Manchester. And we didn't really have any outcome measures, so we weren't sure who was coming through the doors, what was happening, where the hubs making a difference. So we were really interested in the Impetus blueprint model, so we have used that as a bit of a basis to shape our thinking, and we involved our GM Youth Network Youth Panel in spring of this year to actually go out and review the current offer and share with us what they thought a youth hub should look like. We held a workshop in July where we had a look at what did we have and what did young people want and where were the gaps. And we've now established a multi-agency project team to kind of make that change. So what our young people said was they wanted clear referral stroke access routes. What they said to us was that the current hub network required work coach referral to access it. And actually our aspiration was very much that these hubs should be for all of our young people, and that we should be able to kind of host drop-ins and make it really easy to access. They were really clear there needed to be more information. Nobody really knew about where the hubs were. And really interestingly, the panel said they wanted access to mental health service, housing support, and financial advice as 3 really key areas. But, which was a real challenge to our original thinking, they didn't want all of those partners to have a presence all the time on site in the hubs. And what young people said was, actually, if everybody's in there and kind of waiting to kind of meet and greet us, that could be quite overwhelming. And if you're a bit nervous, actually seeing a sea of faces and organisations probably wouldn't help. We just want to know there's someone there we can talk to and those connections can be made for us. So that was a really important piece of learning, I think. National Career Service presence was also seen to be really important to hook in, and we're utilising kind of our new NCS contract providers for the Northwest to really embed that within the youth hub model. And the young people felt that having training providers actually present on site was really useful. So we're working through our network to look at how do we do that impartially, how do we make sure it's the right offer, but there's also a connection to things that aren't delivered on site. And just echoing some of Ben's points, really important points for the young people where the youth hubs feel quite informal. You know, you've not got everyone suited and booted. Some really interesting points about some of the hubs in place that had bars on the windows and security guards on the door, and feeling of, you know, we kind of understand why some of that might happen, but it doesn't make you feel like this is a nice space to come into. And length of time for appointments, so not being kind of really rigid about it's 10 minutes for an appointment. If you're late, you've kind of missed it. And not on the slide, but actually a really key piece of feedback young people gave us was It's great where there are more social activities and different things happening, so you don't have to go into the hub and straight away start talking about your barriers and what is your action plan and kind of what's next. You can just go in and have a coffee. And there was one hub that was doing kind of pottery and craft sessions, which the young people said that was really nice because you could go in and sort of get comfortable in the space before you started thinking about kind of your next steps. And I think particularly what we've seen post-COVID is a lot of young people saying, we're not ready to have those conversations yet, but we just need to kind of get out, get over the threshold and find a way to kind of re-engage. So those were the really important points that we're building the network around. So we've set up a multi-agency project team. I won't read through all the terms of reference objectives, but fundamentally, the aim of this project team is to facilitate the development of an infrastructure. So, we already have youth hubs in place, they're just not working together. And what we've done is get the right people around our virtual table to develop that infrastructure, look at how we can learn from each other, and to build a virtual network of colleagues across Greater Manchester who are connected, who can work together and who can make sure that we've got that right offer and a recognisable hub offer across all 10 of our local authority areas. So these are the organisations who are represented. Again, I won't read through them all, but they very much reflect people who are delivering support services, are trying to coordinate support services, and who can help to bring together their networks and their connections to get that offer into the hubs. So what we are developing is a consistent core offer, so it doesn't matter which hub you go into or who's delivering there or who's leading it. There will be a consistent core offer that's really clearly communicated. We've got a clear age range and access kind of approach. So at the moment, some of our hubs are 16 to 24, some are 18 to 24. So we're just working through that consistency. And we are connecting the youth hub plans into things like our care leaver, education, employment and training plan. We are connecting into public service reform work around community hubs. So we're making sure that we don't have a hub there for these people and a hub there for other people, and that we're using our resources to the best way. Because as Ben said, we don't have kind of a big pot of money to put into this. We are really trying to repurpose and coordinate what we already have. So we have established 2 task and finish groups. They've got 3 tasks, but there are 2 groups. And again, really echoes Ben's presentation earlier. So we have one group where we are looking at shared outcome measures, and within that, data sharing protocols. And through our work with the young people, we are looking at impact and outcome measures that aren't just about how many people come through the door and how many people then go into work or training, but trying to dig underneath for how many people is the fact they've actually just come into the youth hub a really strong outcome, and the fact that they are now engaging actually, and again, who are they then being referred on to, and what's the kind of impact for that, so that we've got a real focus on shared learning of what works best, what do you need to do in order to do that, and I think really importantly, have we still got gaps? So have we still got some young people that we think potentially could really benefit from the youth hubs, but they're not accessing them, and how can we kind of look at why? Ultimately, for that as well, we'd really like to be able to make a business case to show why the youth hubs are really important, and if we need to look at resourcing to kind of build that network and build further, I think this will give us a really strong case to do that. We've then got a second task and finish group, which is around workforce development, and that's come out of a really strong feeling that we can set up an amazing infrastructure, we can kind of have premises and we can have people, but that support will only ever be as good as the skill set and the knowledge base of the people who are kind of delivering that support within the hubs. So there's 2 real streams to this work. So one is around a core skill set and a core kind of knowledge level and shared culture. So again, that welcoming approach and listening and kind of coaching skills to enable young people to feel comfortable in the space. But also a knowledge element of, if you don't know that there's debt advice around the corner and you don't know how to access housing support, and you don't know what the provision looks like in the area, you can't connect young people into it. So we're bringing together a toolkit through that work stream for our hub infrastructure, so that it's really easy for anyone working in there to access the right support and make those connections, and get that consistent approach across. So linked to that, we will be looking at comms and awareness. So does everyone know about the hubs? Are they, do they know how to access them? And how do we maximise our shared employer connections to bring employers into the hubs, with a two-way aim of helping our young people access opportunities and understand the pathways available, but also giving employers that line of sight to their future workforce and enable them to work with us to connect with young people. They're quite ambitious, but we're cracking on with it. So we have a draft timeline. We are asking, and this is a bit of lessons learned from kind of previous hubs and work that we've all done. I think very often hubs can start with a really strong commitment across all partners of, yes, we want to be part of this, but it's not always signed up to elsewhere in their organisation, and the resources aren't always committed, and sometimes it can fall down a little bit. So we are asking all of our partners to sign up by the end of this month to, yes, our senior leadership are aware of this and they're part of it, and this is what we can offer, and this is what we can do within the hub, so that we can manage that and make sure that we're all doing what we've said we're going to do. We are agreeing our model and our leadership. So we are looking at, so the combined authorities role is very much about that kind of convening, oversight, bringing everyone together and looking at how we can learn and how we can actually make this happen. But within the model, there are different organisations leading and managing different bits of hubs, and we're just bringing together that kind of model of how do we hold the ring, how do we keep it all happening. The task and finish groups will be happening through this month and next month, with the aim of having recommendations by the end of December. So that's around the workforce development and the impact measurements. And then we've identified potentially 3 hub pilots who will be testing out the kind of workforce development and the impact measures January to March, feeding back in April, and then looking at the wider rollout of how do we do this consistent model across all of our hubs from April next year. Just to say as well, though, the other hubs are still continuing to deliver, and we'll probably, if there are things we can do immediately, then we will. Just a couple of key things that have come out from the project team activity, and again, they really echo kind of Ben's comments from the Impetus work. I think what we found is there is some fabulous activity happening already across Greater Manchester. What we really just needed was a forum to share that and do more of it. So we've got all the key components, they're just not happening consistently across the sub-region. I said our partners are signing up to commitments, so we're really clear who's doing what, and we've identified those 3 test pilot hubs where we will test some of the learning. Our existing hub leads are just starting to go out and visit each other, so to have a look at, oh, that's really interesting, I wonder how we could do that thing that you're doing. So they're going out and kind of looking again for some of those immediate things that might be really easy to implement. And we have one partner who has a hub in central Manchester, but a GM-wide offer, who has said to us, actually, people really struggle to come into the central Manchester hub from kind of Oldham, Manchester. It feels a bit too hard. If we could deliver as an outreach from these other hubs, that would be great. So testing that out as if we use that whole infrastructure, how can we do more? We have one hub that has a secondment model in place. So a training provider has seconded someone into the local authority team, so that they've kind of got access to kind of two sets of data, 2 sets of networks, but they can kind of do more by working in a different way. That does require some funding, but we can see that it really works. So again, we're looking at, well, how could we do more of that? What's the art of the possible? We're also really interested in looking at some of that kind of workforce resourcing. Partners can obviously be within the hubs, but generally need appointments and need to know that young people are going to be coming through the door. So how do we enable those drop-ins, and what can that model look like, and how can we do it together? but also how do we do outreach more effectively? There are some young people who won't come into a hub unless there's a degree of outreach, both to bring them in and also to help them with onward referrals. So as part of the workforce development, we're really actively looking at that. We've connected into wider work on digital inclusion. So we have a data bank offer across Greater Manchester to kind of access data and connectivity. So we're working with that team to make sure that all of the hubs have the right connectivity so that young people can come in and use that. If they don't have Wi-Fi at home, they can come in and use the hubs to access learning and kind of online services. And whilst we have a youth panel who are supporting us in the development of this, we're just mapping across that partnership what other forums exist and how can we make sure there's a really strong youth voice. So I think our key lesson is that partnerships and connections are absolutely the key to success and how we make this infrastructure happen. But again, echoing Ben's point, it does need coordination and leadership to bring that together. And that's kind of very much what we're trying to do through the combined authority. So to bring that to life and kind of how it's working, I'm going to hand over to Suzanne Gilmore now from Wigan Council, who can tell you what's been happening in Lee. Suzanne, over to you.
Thanks, Sharon. Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne from Wigan Council as part of Greater Manchester. We have had a youth hub in Wigan Central for a couple of years now. It's currently housed within one of our main life centres, which is very much a customer services base for residents in Wigan of all ages. So although it is used and it's used as a youth hub, or part of it is, we felt that there was a distinct lack of some youth hub provision over at the Lee side of the Wigan borough, which is often seen as a bit of a disconnect from Wigan. Lee residents don't always see themselves as living in Wigan, so it's one of those things that you have in kind of large towns or cities where there's, you know, sometimes a bit of a challenge around crossing boundaries of different localities. So because as well there's very much a need for a youth hub in Lee. We've got high levels of youth unemployment in Lee and some gaps in provision also. So this has been quite a while in planning in terms of bringing this Lee Youth Hub to life. Did we have a picture, Sharon, on the previous slide, or has that been... Oh, there you go. So that's what it looks like now. It has only just recently opened. We don't have signage, so it does look a little bit bland at the moment. But I wanted to show a real life picture rather than our original blueprint of what an artist impression. But that will have some signage, obviously, and branding up there. But it's a joint venture with Lee Sports Village, which is getting a little bit of notoriety, well, famous for the Women's Euros, which is great, and lots of activities going on at Lee Sports Village now. So it's bang in front of the Lee Sports Village and also Wigan and Lee College there, and it's a joint collaboration with Wigan Council and Lee Sports Village, and that's the building that has been built, and it's been a modular build which has been put up in a number of weeks, which was amazing to see it being built. Obviously there's been some funding put into this, joint funding, which again comes back to the conclusions in the previous presentation. Is, you know, money is quite important in making sure that things work, and we want to make sure it works right. So this is a bit of a larger scale youth hub, really, I think, for us, and you know, so far it's working great. We've not had the official launch, we've had the soft launch, and we're starting to have partners in here. So if we can move on, sorry, Sharon. Okay, thank you. So yeah, as I mentioned, we've got high levels of youth unemployment. We wanted definitely as well to have a real focus on health and well-being in the area, because we know that particularly through the pandemic, we've got a lot more, many more young people who are suffering with mental health and social anxiety. So having somewhere in Lee where young people can come together and also gain that support on hand was crucial really for us. So that's one of the main reasons we wanted to have that there. It's a real partnership approach as well for engagement of young people. So the main aim obviously is to engage people and to work with them of all ages. So we've got some high school children working out of there, and we've got right up to the age of 24, 25 with the DWP involvement. So the primary aim really is to make sure that we can move those young people on into employment, education and training, and obviously support our sort of performance measures around looking at needing employment. So currently we have DWP work coaches working out of the hub alongside Wigan Council's team of careers and progression advisors, and also another delivery partner called Wigan Youth Zone, who are delivering an employability support programme in conjunction with DWP in there. So we've got a provider on hand as well, which is great. We are also going to be having other providers coming in, such as training providers, which Sharon has mentioned has worked well in other areas, and National Careers Service as well. And there's lots of other providers or services that have expressed an interest to become involved and use the spaces. So different programmes, different providers such as Wigan Athletic, for example, Prince's Trust, the Growth Company. So we have had a lot of interest in people wanting to use the facilities, which is great. We've also got targeted youth support service within the council who work with our young people who are most at risk of criminality and most at risk of becoming NEET ultimately. So they do a lot of work on outreach and preventative work with those young people, and they also host lots of youth forums there to support those young people to have a voice and to help in the delivery and the shaping of the youth hub going forward. We're also developing lots of links now going forward with local employers and voluntary community sector organisations to really help us with, you know, the enterprise work as well, and bringing people together and introducing different organisations and to young people and raising aspirations. Linking those employers with schools as well is key, and making sure we can really help support young people to have a plan for the future, and keeping the work within the community as well, keeping the work within Wigan and Lee local authority, so keeping those young people engaged in opportunities in the borough. Thank you, Sharon. So just as a small overview really of what the Youth Hub encompasses at the moment. Unfortunately, I've not got internal pictures, but I'm sure we will have that going forward. But we've got a great computer room in there, which is actually all set up via a library membership. So it's similar to what the computer pods that we have in the libraries, and it helps them to, like Sharon mentioned, have free access to all the digital services, Wi-Fi. They can do lots of other things apart from just CV building and applying for jobs. They can help with their housing benefit claims, and they can help with lots of other advice regarding council services and wider. So there's lots of links on there that can support them, and digital learning as well, which is great. There's a training and skills room, which is where the partners kind of come together, which is fantastic. So it's that real co-location in one space where DWP, our services within the council, supporting young people, and the Wigan Youth Zone can really kind of come together and have conversations about the young people that are being referred, and have a real plan about how we're going to work going forward. A bit of a case conferencing as well, which is really helpful. There's also a big workshop and multi-purpose room, so other organisations can come in, maybe do some arts and crafts, or some there's some kitchen facilities in there as well, so there could be some cooking going on as well, which is a full commercial kitchen in there, which is great. So there's lots of plans afoot for that as well, which is really good. Thinking about cost of living crisis, it's a warm space for them to come to. They can come and have food there as well. There's showering facilities, so there's a lot of support there to support young people who are in need of that. Common room, which is a real kind of chill out zone for them, which is one of the things young people express they'd want to have. So we've got some gaming stations in there. We think we've got a pool table in there, and table football, I think it's called, bean bags and things like that. So everybody can sort of chill out in that area within the groups that come in and use the youth hub. There's a real state-of-the-art health and fitness and wellbeing studio upstairs, and there's a gym also downstairs. So a lot of the Lee Sports Village sort of professional clubs will be using the high-tech fitness suite, so that probably won't be as accessible for our young people, but there is a gym downstairs which is fully accessible, and it's all brand new, and it's really quite impressive. Soundproofed activity room for some music activities, and there's also a sensory room as well, so our social care are using that for young people and young adults with disabilities, so it's a fantastic all-round resource really in terms of facilities. Thanks, Sharon. Well, I think it's the last slide now from me. So yeah, just kind of in conclusion, really, it's early days for us, but certainly through the planning, the long time in planning this, and you know, the buy-in from all different services and partners, and like say SMT, and making sure there's that real strong leadership behind this. It's working well so far, and you know, we've got lots of ambitions to grow that even further as time goes on. So we've got real co-location of services within the centre, that case conference and signposting process that happens, and referral to different organisations, training providers, colleges, employers, the direct referral to the Wigan Youth Zone Pathway to Employment programme on site. So we're really supporting that programme, which is that first step really to supporting those unemployed young people claiming benefits to actually move on. We've had real sort of youth voice and involvement from young people right the way through from the start, right to finishing, and the design and the decoration internally of the youth hub. So that's been key to making sure this is successful. There's going to be real strong evaluation of that attendance and usage of the youth hub, which is really important to look at that impact measure. And there's going to be that, as I think as Ben mentioned before, that tracking element, making sure that we've got lots of evaluation, case studies and evidence of young people progressing into EAT. You know, we'll be closely monitoring our caseloads, making sure that we can match where young people have moved on to really see the benefits of this hub. I mentioned before about that community wealth building, really important as being in Lee community and bringing in local providers, local organisations and voluntary community sector to get involved in the youth hub and support our young people within neighbourhoods. And, you know, ultimately it's right next to the Lee Sports Village and the college campus, so it's well placed in terms of location for travel. So yeah, it's, as I say, early days, but it's working really well. It's very impressive, and there will be kind of a launch, perhaps now going to be in the new year sometime, but there will be more that I can give more information on, and maybe an update further down the line. So yeah, I hope that's helpful for everybody. If there's any questions I can help with. Thanks, Sharon.
I was just going to hand back to you, Henry. So that's us, GM and Wigan.
No, thank you both. Thank you both so much. It was the Lee Sports Village sound, the youth hub in Lee. Sorry, sounds really interesting. Really well done for that. And I've just moved to Manchester, so I will be coming to visit.
Fabulous.
So you'll see me there.
Welcome. Yeah.
Whenever I can. So yeah, I just wondered if anyone had any questions. I saw someone put in the chat, Sharon, asking for your contact details. So if you just want to do that, yeah, if anyone's got any questions, then use the chat or put a hand up about the Lee Youth Hub or the Greater Manchester Combined Authority approach in general. Hannah?
Yeah, hi. That it looks absolutely amazing. I'm going to find a reason to come and visit from London because I just want to come and see what's going on up there. It looks amazing. Can I come and live there, please? Thank you. My question was possibly a bit more general. So I'm coming from an organisation who is thinking about what it would be like for us to set up a youth hub. I'm linked to a housing association, and we have communities, estates, neighbourhoods where we think actually something like this, if we can place it right in the heart of some of our communities where we know there's kind of high youth unemployment, it could be really impactful. But you also got me thinking, someone made the point about this kind of post-COVID generation, which I know is a bit of a trendy phrase, potentially being more reluctant to come into new spaces, that sort of thing. Is anyone thinking about what virtual delivery looks like? Is there any thought around what a virtual youth hub could look like, or is the idea really tied to having a physical space potentially with some virtual delivery attached to it, or kind of signposting? I'm just trying to think about, could you design a virtual youth hub, and what would be the pros and cons of that way of thinking?
Shall I jump in first? So we focus predominantly across Greater Manchester on that face-to-face element, and that's really a direct response to what young people said. So we did quite an extensive consultation through the pandemic of what's different, what are you concerned about, and what young people said was, we really want a place that we can go to. But what we are doing to sit kind of underneath it, the physical presence, is we're looking at a kind of a digital offer as well, which would have kind of the information so it can be used by professionals as well as young people. If I'm honest, we haven't really thought about virtual routes to actually connect to the young people, mainly because what they've said to us is we want to actually walk through a door. But it's a really interesting point, actually. So yeah, if anyone else is doing it, we'd be quite keen to to learn.
Great, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Anna. No, it's a really interesting question. If has anyone else got any questions? Or I'm going to ask one just in case someone's thinking of, because I know obviously Ben spoke about it as well, about getting young people into good jobs with sustained outcomes is one of the most important things, particularly when looking at the impact of youth hubs. And I know in Manchester you have the Good Employment Charter. So I wondered if you're like making the most of links with employers on the Good Employment Charter to work directly with youth hubs.
Yes, we absolutely are. And as you said that, Henry, I thought, oh, I've missed them off my list of the project team because they are connected. So I will remedy that immediately. So the colleagues from the Good Employment Charter are involved in this work, and also our work to support care leavers with very much that aim of, let's make sure that we're helping our employers to create those best routes to employment. But what we're also looking to do is to utilise, certainly with our bigger employers, our social value commitments. So where services being procured and commissioned, actually bringing these offers into that social value commitment. And we've got a separate piece of work in Greater Manchester around bringing together a space where we can really understand which employers are doing what and who's supporting which pieces of work, and where can we maximise that a little bit more. And again, what young people have said to us is that they've given us a really clear steer on what they would want in terms of flexible working, slightly different recruitment processes. So we're working with, again, colleagues at the Good Employment Charter to look at how can we do more of that. Work in progress.
Thank you. Angela?
Oh, there we go. The mic's gone up. Hi, good morning, everybody. I work for Inges. We work for lots of different contracts, but the contract particularly that I'm sitting with is with probation. So we're working with 18+ males who have either been in custody or have a sentence within community. Just touching on a couple of things that were talked about earlier. I know Ben kind of touched about it, the GDPR issue. I've previously worked for Prince's Trust here in the Northeast, and we were part of a youth hub which was set up with local council and the DWP. One of the sticking points that I'm not sure if it ever got resolved, because I left before it did, if it got resolved, was the whole sharing information aspect of it, and talking about making sure that, you know, there's lots of organisations doing the same kind of work. So there's possible funding issues, kind of like, you know, if we're keeping some kind of tracking, how does that work? Because you've got, you know, GDPR issues. I don't know what your experience has been, Sharon, with that.
Yeah, so a couple of things in terms of kind of the probation link. The hub that is central Manchester based but has a GM offer is the CFO hub. which we are kind of connecting out into. Yeah, GDPR we are absolutely looking at, and we're looking at through the task and finish group, looking at the impact measures. I think some of what we're quite keen to do and what is working in some of the hubs is almost that warm handover with young people, and kind of, you know, them taking the lead on what they share and what they don't share, and probably not impact reporting at an individual level, because, you know, that's where you really get into the kind of the sticky parts. So we're kind of probably an informal element of making sure we've got all the dots joined up in the right support for young people, but looking at our impact at a bit of a higher level. But if there's anyone in the Northeast you can link us to who we can maybe pick their brains, we'd be really interested in that. And obviously, again, we're really happy to come back and share where we get to with that. But we know it's a sticky one.
Thank you.
Fraser.
Hi, thanks, Suzanne and Sharon. Really interesting to hear about the youth hubs. So I'm from Skills Builder. We work with charities and not-for-profits to kind of create a shared language around essential skills. I was just wondering whether you've got like any form of kind of platform or portal where you share best practice across different youth hubs, and just to kind of get best practice and see what works in different youth hubs. We've got like a few guides and we've got a framework that could help. So if you do have a kind of portal, we'd be happy to kind of contribute there. But I was just wondering how it kind of works with sharing best practice across the country.
Okay, so we're not as technically advanced as to have a portal. However, we are using the project team very much to kind of have that as the repository of having those conversations, really, of we're doing that and it's working really well. And what's been really nice about the project team is we've then got partners going, oh, can I come and see that? Can I come and have a look at that? And one of our fabulous policy support officers in my team is pulling that together into more of a document for us to think about how we join it up at the moment. We'd be really keen to have a chat around, yeah, how we can work with you around some of your learning as well, Fraser, and what we want to do. And we're not quite sure how this will work, but we want to bring all of that into the toolkit for the frontline workforce so that they can see what works and they can see how to do it. And I think our thinking is we will have at key points in the year opportunities to bring that frontline workforce together, virtually or in real life, to do some of that sharing of learning and what works, and, you know, and hear from them, I think, about what they're worried about. So that one's a bit of a work in progress. It's not very techy, but the building blocks are there, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds good. Yeah, I'd be happy to kind of have a conversation around that. And yeah, I was just kind of wondering whether that was kind of devolved in terms of different areas. So obviously, like, you're working with your local authorities in Manchester, but likewise, would you then share best practice with like the youth hubs in London and then Birmingham and stuff like that? And is that just kind of ad hoc, or is that like, how does that work?
So for us, we are always happy to share, and we're always happy to learn as well and be challenged on what we're doing. So we don't really have a formal process for it. But I've obviously popped my email in the chat. We are happy to come and talk to anyone who might want to kind of hear a bit more about what we're doing, or you know, how we've done it. So yeah, open offer. We're always happy to help if we can.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. So if that's the end of the question, then we'll let you go, Sharon.
That is perfect. I'm only a minute over, so I'm going to scoot over to another meeting now. But thanks, everyone. That was really helpful. Cheers.
Cheers. Okay, now we'll go back to see if anyone's got any questions for Impetus. I know it was a while ago, but if there are any questions, then put your hands up. Again, I'm going to use my role as chair to get in a question early. So I'm going to ask Ben and Phoebe. And obviously you were heavily involved in the setup of the Birmingham Library Youth Hub. Is there any way, do you go back to like check in and check up on how they're getting along, and if they're like still working closely to the procedures and like plans you put in place?
Yeah, we had a number of follow-up calls with them. They had a kind of formal opening and launch that the Mayor Andy Street went to. I try to pop in whenever I'm in Birmingham just to see how it's going. Annoyingly, the last time I was in Birmingham, it was the Conservative Party conference, and therefore that part of town was very busy, and they were basically they'd scaled back for the week because of all the kind of protests and stuff. But yeah, there's an element of like to keep in touch just to see what's happening, of course. But there's also an element of like you kind of have to take a little bit of a step back, I think, to give people the space to run it, kind of thing, in a way that works for them without kind of helicoptering in the background.
Yeah, that's understandable. Any other questions for Impetus? If not, then we will move on, and I'm going to ask questions again now, so hopefully someone is eager enough to put their hand up. But for DWP, I mentioned at the beginning that they won't be doing a segment as such, but if anyone does have any questions for them, then now is your time to ask.
I had a quick, I'm not sure whether it's for DWP or just more generally, but is there any kind of centralized list of people who are already doing youth hubs, or people who are interested in doing one, to link up and see what's going on locally, see what else is being delivered locally, and, you know, opportunities for cross-working?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah's put her camera on, so I'll let her answer that. But yeah.
Thanks, Henry, and thanks for the question as well. So we don't have a centralized list of all of the different hubs, but we do have a list of contacts in each region who've been involved and know the picture in that part of the country that people can get in touch with, that we can certainly look to share and pop in the chat, or during the course of the meeting, or just afterwards, so that people have someone they can engage with to find out a little bit more. Sorry, the office has got particularly noisy just as I've come off mute.
Great, thank you.
And ERSA have been doing a bit of work with individual youth hubs around the country, and seeing what ERSA members are currently working in youth hubs, and where there aren't youth hubs, and helping our members who operate in areas where there are youth hubs to connect with existing youth hubs, if that makes sense. So, and Hannah, if you need any help linking up with employment support providers and skills providers in your area, then policy@ersa.org.uk is the email. One of my colleagues will put that in the chat, but yeah, get in touch and we can help you with that as well. And
that's brilliant.
That offer goes out to anyone, because I know there was a youth hub survey that ERSA put out, that's in the chat as well, I think, and we've looked through the results of that recently, and there were a few on there that said that they weren't involved in their youth hub and would like to be, and we started to initiate conversations with those people. So yeah, any more questions for DWP? Or Sarah, I should say, rather than just DWP. Okay, if not, then I am going to open up the floor, but kind of talking on what Fraser mentioned about sharing good practice, and just wanted to know if there are any youth hub leads here that wanted to talk about how their own youth hubs are working locally, if they're facing any problems currently, and if they wanted to share any examples of good practice. So again, the floor is yours. Got somebody coming off mute. Emma.
Hiya, I'm from Hackney. Yeah, we've been working with the Youth Hub. I've got some staff who've been co-locating in one of the youth hubs, which is based in a college in Hackney. I think one of the main challenges for us is the restrictions of the referrals coming through the work coach. So I don't know if others, I think that was mentioned earlier, how you've kind of got around that, or is it just by having other staff present and them supporting those young people? So yeah, I'd be interested to hear a bit more about that.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that is interesting. If Suzanne, you mentioned about in Lee about outreach, and just wondered how that was working, or how it's planning on working with getting referrals that aren't just
Yeah,
your work coach.
we hold a database of young people. Basically, we have the responsibility for need tracking and need support in the local authority, as a old connection service, career service would have in different areas of the country. So we would outreach, we would support young people through tracking them, finding out, we know where they live basically. So if there's any 16 to 18-year-olds that are neat, and they're not engaging with anybody as far as we know, we would go out to them. So we make phone calls, we knock on doors, we work with our targeted youth support service to go out and do joint visits as well. So we actually, encourage people to engage with us in that way. So yeah, I mean, DWP referrals do come through, but we don't, we work with the younger age as well. So we don't rely on just working with DWP. It is about that younger age as well, and that need prevention work. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know if that helps, or if you're focusing more on the 18 plus, Emma, I'm not sure.
My team will support people 16 plus. Yeah.
Do you link up with the equivalent sort of careers or connection service?
We do, yeah. And we have our own employment support advisors as well. I think it's just at the moment, I think the Youth Hub is kind of being promoted more through DWP itself, and therefore isn't, I think, reaching young people and not necessarily claiming benefits is one of the challenges.
Yeah.
I think branding is another issue, and staffing's another issue. So I think, I don't think we've got very strong visible branding. So I think that's something we can talk more about as a partnership. And the other thing is, I think staffing. I don't know, are your youth hubs typically staffed by DWP every day, or is it through various partners as well staffing it?
The Youth Hub, and I meant to mention this in the presentation, has a duty manager, so sort of an impartial duty manager on hand. But no, we go in a couple of afternoons a week, or a couple of days a week, should I say, and then DWP are in them every day. So, and the Youth Zone, who's the other partner, are in there every day as well. So yeah, it is a resource issue sometimes, trying to make sure that there's somebody available at all times, but that's where the signposting comes in, and the knowledge of our partners is really important, and we know who works with whom and what the referral processes are, and it's just building up those relationships, and know we can just pick up the phone and they know we're not in on a certain day, but then we can make an appointment for the week after, and that kind of thing. So it does work quite well that way.
I know in Birmingham they I think in what Sharon mentioned earlier, but they basically allowed the young people that they work with to help design the logo of the Youth Hub in the library, and that looks really good. It doesn't have the WP or Jobcentre Plus logo anywhere, and I think it does just add on to that welcoming atmosphere type of thing. Any more questions? Becky?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, just around, sorry Sarah, I know obviously it was DWP a minute ago, but I just wanted to ask, where we've got existing DWP youth hubs, what is the forward plan for DWP in terms of the youth hub? Is the review to step back away from the youth hubs and let other partners run that, or is the anticipation still that the DWP will still be involved in that? The reason I asked that question is we've currently got 2 youth hubs being run by DWP at the moment. We were expecting a third, but we are being told by DWP locally that there is no provision there's no staff at DWP to actually look at setting up that third one. So we just wondered what the update was from DWP, because we are waiting for some feedback locally as well, just on obviously how DWP are moving youth hubs forward.
Yeah, so youth hubs are still part of our unemployment offer for young people, and we see that definitely being the case in the medium term, because there are still lots of young people who aren't in work. I think would be the kind of high level answer to that. I think that said, they are a kind of place-based response, so the position in different places will be very different. So there will be some decisions about actually whether, and you've talked about kind of flows, whether the flows are coming in the right place, because it should be really clear that DWP resource in youth hubs is to support kind of DWP young people who are DWP claimants. So it may be that there are other partners in there supporting other groups of young people, and that is brilliant that we make the most of all the support offers that we've got there. But there will be kind of resourcing considerations, sorry, excuse me, in kind of conversations at a local level. That said, if you're having particular challenges in that respect that you don't think are reasonable in the context of the kind of caseloads and numbers of young people in that area that will benefit from that support, then that's certainly something to kind of pick up with the kind of regional contacts that Rob's already shared with ERSA colleagues for wider kind of dissemination.
Thank you very much.
And any other questions or examples of good practice or problems anyone's having? If not, oh, Ben.
I was hoping you wouldn't mind if I was just a little bit provocative, just to kind of make an explicit follow-up to what Sarah said. If you take the view that there's a group of young people who aren't claimants for whatever reasons, who are in need of support, which I think some people on this call probably will, it flows from what Sarah just said, that DWP's involvement with youth hubs can't help that group because they've got that resourcing constraint. So I think there is a space for people on this call who aren't DWP to look at that group that is kind of to underserved and to think about that as a potential priority group. And I think there is an inevitable tension between, if you look to your youth hubs to be kind of DWP led and kind of cohere around what DWP are offering, you'll only be offering to what DWP is offering to. And if you want to offer to a group outside of that, you need to kind of be willing to kind of step away a little bit from DWP and go, this is the group we want to help, and that's not the group that DWP is focusing on. So just to kind of name that explicitly, I guess. And that's not a criticism of anybody. That's just a kind of just follows from what DWP funding effectively.
Anybody else got anything to say? If not, then I'll let Elizabeth have the final word and give you time back in your days. And just quickly before I do pass over to Elizabeth, buy one get one free. Buy a ticket to come to the ERSA conference. See the Birmingham Library Youth Hub for free. I'll leave you with that.
That's a great one, Henry. So I've got 2 things really quickly, actually 3. The first one is the employability awards. The shortlists are complete and we are going to make an announcement later tomorrow. So watch the space if you've got any interest in terms of you've submitted a nomination or you're just interested in the sector and looking to see who the shining stars are. So please see that. As Henry said, ERSA's conference, which has now fallen back into our usual schedule. I feel we're a little bit like the London Marathon. We've gone back now to November, and we are going to be at the Library of Birmingham on the 30th of November and the 1st of December. On the evening of the 30th of November, we will be having the awards ceremony. I think the really important thing to say about the conference is there is something for everyone in the sector. You don't need to be a member of the senior leadership team. You don't need to be a manager. You could be a frontline advisor, an employer engagement staff, a specialist work coach, a youth work coach, a skills provider. Wherever you sit in the sector, there will be something on the agenda. There'll be many things on the agenda over the 2 days for you. We've got some really interesting keynote speakers. By next week, we should be starting to make some announcements about how it all fits together. But please consider coming. And I would say to managers, bring a member of your team. Bring as many members of your team as you can. Some of the larger organisations are booking multiple places. It's a great place for people to network and to meet other people in the sector. The awards will be stunning and stellar and will be on the top floor of the Library of Birmingham. And yes, the Youth Hub's there, and maybe we should warn them that we're coming because we don't want to overwhelm them and scare away their young people. And the third thing is, I think it was at 10:19, Laura Benfield put the ERSA Youth Hub survey in the chat. If you haven't completed it already, please do so. We are going to be closing that soon. Okay, thank you very much. And thanks to the speakers and to Henry.
Thanks, everybody. And Francesca's back next month, so no more from me, luckily for you lot. But yeah, have a